From a quiet corner of the world, I'm virtually with you, ready to share this intimate tale. It's a comforting thought, imagining where you might be, perhaps curled on your sofa, nestled in bed, or even alone in a peaceful kitchen, much like I was on that pivotal night. My name is Clara. I'm 40 years old, and until recently, I believed I had a firm grasp on who I was. A wife, a mother, a woman who meticulously followed the rules. I genuinely thought that diligence, unwavering loyalty, and integrity would somehow guarantee a stable existence. Instead, life delivered a series of stark reminders of financial precarity. It began subtly, escalating grocery costs, rising fuel prices, and my husband Michael's reduced work hours. We reassured ourselves it was a temporary setback, just a few difficult months to navigate. We leaned more heavily on credit cards, dipped into our modest savings, and then, in a desperate charade, pretended those savings were still intact. The true turning point wasn't a grand dramatic collapse. It was a Tuesday afternoon, me sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, a cold knot of dread tightening in my stomach as I stared at the rent due date on my online banking app, redoing the same disheartening calculations over and over. I kept hoping I'd made a mistake, mistyped a number, overlooked a hidden resource. I hadn't. We were short, not by a small, manageable sum, but by an amount that made denial impossible. My husband Michael was at work, grinding through a double shift he'd practically begged for. I knew that if I told him, he'd spiral into panic. He'd suggest another loan, selling our car, or borrowing from friends we both knew we couldn't afford to be indebted to. So I did something I hadn't done in our 12 years of tenancy with the same landlord. I picked up my phone, located Arthur Properties in my contacts, and pressed call. My hand actually trembled as it rang. I felt like a teenager making a nervous first call to a crush. Isn't that bizarre? At 40, I felt diminutive again, terrified of disappointing someone. "Clara?" His voice, warm and resonant, came through the line. "Everything all right?" "Hi, Arthur. Do you have a moment? I need to speak with you about the rent." There was a pause, just long enough for my heart to hammer against my ribs. "Certainly," he said. "Would you prefer to come to the office, or should I drop by later?" "Could you maybe stop over?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I'd feel more comfortable talking here." "All right," he said gently. "I'll be there in about an hour." The moment I hung up, an overwhelming urge to retract the call washed over me. I wanted to magically conjure the money and pretend nothing was amiss. Instead, I moved through the apartment, meticulously straightening cushions, wiping down countertops, opening windows to let in fresh air, as if I could somehow scrub away my predicament. When the buzzer finally sounded, my stomach plummeted. I swallowed hard and pressed the button to let him in. Arthur is in his late 50s, perhaps early 60s, tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who likely spent years in manual labor before transitioning to the world of ledgers. For years he'd simply been the landlord to me, courteous, professional, distant. We didn't exchange pleasantries or personal anecdotes. It was always a swift exchange of envelopes and brief, polite smiles. But that day, when he stepped into my kitchen, something felt profoundly different. Perhaps it was because I was seeing him through a new lens, not just as a figure with authority over my home, but as a man I was about to let down. "Hey, Clara," he said, closing the door behind him. "You sounded concerned. What's going on?" I gestured towards the table. "Would you like some coffee? I just brewed a fresh pot." "Sure," he replied, his gaze unwavering on my face. "Only if you'll join me." I poured us both coffee, grateful for the simple task that occupied my trembling hands. When I finally sat opposite him, I felt his eyes on me, patient and expectant. "I'm just going to say it," I blurted out. "We can't pay the full rent this month." The words hung heavy between us, a raw confession. "I'm so sorry," I added quickly. "We've been trying desperately to catch up, but Michael's hours were cut, and I genuinely thought we could make it work. But I miscalculated. We're short, and I didn't want to just ignore it or avoid your calls." He didn't erupt in anger. He didn't sigh in exasperation or launch into a lecture. He simply leaned back slightly, folded his arms, and nodded slowly. "How short are you?" he asked gently. I told him the amount. It sounded even more damning when spoken aloud. He let out a slow breath. "You've never missed rent in all these years, Clara." "I know," I said, my eyes stinging. "I'm mortified this is even happening." "Hey," he said quietly. "Look at me." I met his gaze. His eyes were softer than I expected, a deep shade of brown that echoed the rich, warm tones of the old wooden cabinets behind him. "This economy is hitting everyone," he said. "You're not the only one struggling. You did the right thing by calling me." Something in my throat eased slightly, but the profound shame lingered. "I don't want to lose the apartment," I whispered. "This is our home. My son grew up here. I'll take extra shifts, I'll do anything. I need some time." He took a sip of his coffee, lost in thought. "What if we work something out?" he said finally, a flicker of both hope and fear ignited within me. "What do you mean?" I asked cautiously. "Well," he began, "the building needs more hands-on attention than I can currently provide. I've been meaning to find someone reliable to help out, checking the communal laundry room, handling minor issues, generally keeping an eye on the place. I trust you. You've always been honest with me. If you're willing to assist around the building, I can offset part of your rent for the next couple of months while you get back on your feet." For a second, I simply stared at him. "You mean like a building caretaker?" I asked informally. "Precisely," he said with a small smile. "Nothing too strenuous, but it would be a significant help to me, and it would help you." My initial thought was an intense wave of relief, so powerful I almost wept. My second thought was, why does this feel so personal? Why does this feel like more than just a business transaction? "That's incredibly generous," I said, my voice trembling. "Are you sure?" He shrugged, looking a little bashful. "You've been an exemplary tenant, Clara. I dislike seeing good people get crushed by misfortune." I lowered my eyes to my coffee cup, partly to conceal the welling emotion, partly because I could feel something else stirring within me, a warm, unfamiliar awareness of him as more than just the landlord. And that terrified me more than the overdue notice. Over the next few weeks, I began assisting. I posted small notices in the laundry room, checked the hallway lighting, and texted him when a faucet dripped, or a neighbor accidentally locked themselves out. Our conversations grew longer. Initially, it was all strictly business: repairs, tenants, invoices. Then slowly the dialogue shifted. He'd inquire, "How's your son doing?" and genuinely listen to my answer. He'd stop by with his toolbox and leave having absorbed half my life story. One evening I met him in the hallway to point out a flickering light on the second floor. The building was hushed, that deep quiet that only settles in late at night when the world seems to hold its breath. The overhead light buzzed softly above us. "So," he said as we walked back down the stairs, "how are you truly holding up?" "Honestly?" I laughed without humor. "Do you want the polite answer or the genuine one?" "Always the genuine one," he said. We stopped on the landing between floors, equidistant from my apartment and the main entrance. He leaned against the railing, his steady gaze fixed on me, making me feel simultaneously exposed and remarkably safe. "I feel like I'm failing at everything," I admitted, the words spilling out. "As a wife, as a mother, as an adult who should have her life together by 40, I'm exhausted all the time. I'm terrified all the time, and sometimes I lie awake wondering when exactly my life stopped feeling like mine." His eyes never left my face. "I don't see a failure when I look at you," he said quietly. "I see someone who's still fighting." My chest tightened. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to me like that, like I was someone worthy of admiration, not just someone who had to be strong because there was no alternative. "You know," he added, his voice softer, "when my wife fell ill, I experienced something similar. Different circumstances, same overwhelming feeling, like the walls were closing in, and nobody noticed. People kept saying, 'You're doing great, Arthur,' but inside, I felt like I was crumbling." I swallowed. "I'm sorry. I didn't know she was sick. She passed 5 years ago," he said. "Cancer. Some days this building is the only thing that keeps me going. Fixing things I can fix, when there were so many things I couldn't." There was a pause, a heavy, intimate silence. We were no longer just landlord and tenant. We were two weary individuals standing in a stairwell, acknowledging the deep wounds life had inflicted. "I wish someone had told me then," he continued. "What I'm telling you now, you're allowed to feel overwhelmed. It doesn't make you weak, it makes you human." I felt warmth bloom behind my eyes. I looked away, blinking rapidly, pretending to adjust a stray hair. "Thank you," I murmured. "You didn't have to say that." "I wanted to," he replied. That night, when I returned to my apartment, Michael was asleep on the couch, the television still on, its blue light flickering across his tired face. I stood there for a moment, observing him, my heart torn between gratitude and a simmering resentment. He was exhausted too. He was trying, in his own way. But a profound distance had grown between us, forged by unpaid bills, unspoken fears, and all the truths we couldn't bring ourselves to share with each other. It was easier to confide in Arthur, and that terrified me. Days morphed into weeks. Our routine evolved into something more comfortable. He'd text, "Can you check if Unit 3B's window is still sticking?" Or, "I left some extra light bulbs in the lobby cabinet. Can you grab a few?" Sometimes he'd add, "How are you today?" Not the perfunctory, "How are you?" You offer a cashier, but the kind that seemed to say, "I'll stay for the complete answer if you let me." One Saturday, I baked a banana bread using the last of the overripe bananas on my counter. On a whim, I cut a slice, wrapped it in foil, and took it down to his office in the building. When he opened the door, he looked surprised, then genuinely pleased. "Well, that's a first," he chuckled. "Payment in banana bread." Heat rushed to my cheeks at his choice of words. "Consider it a thank you," I said, "for working with us on the rent, and for listening." He took the foil-wrapped slice and placed it on his desk, then gestured to the chair opposite him. "Sit for a minute," he said, "if you're not in a rush." I sat. We talked about everything and nothing. Our children, the neighborhoods where we grew up, how much the city had transformed. I laughed at one of his stories, a true, unrestrained laugh, the kind that feels like it's shaking years of dust from your soul. He watched me, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I haven't heard you laugh like that before," he said softly. "I haven't laughed like that in a while," I admitted. The air shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly, in that way you only truly notice in hindsight. The emotional distance between us felt smaller. My awareness of him felt larger. And then came the night everything irrevocably changed. It was raining heavily, the kind of downpour that drapes the city in a thick, gray velvet. I had just placed my son's dinner in the oven when my phone buzzed. "Arthur. Sorry to bother you, we found a leak in the lobby, ceiling. I'm here now. Can you come down for a second?" I slipped on my cardigan and headed downstairs. My hair frizzed at the edges from the humidity, and my socks grew damp from the tiny puddles on the floor. He was standing in the middle of the lobby, gazing up at a dark, wet patch on the ceiling. Water dripped steadily into a plastic bucket on the floor. "Roof again," he muttered. "I swear this building knows when it's payday and deliberately chooses to misbehave." I smiled, then caught him looking at me, not at the ceiling. At me. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said automatically. He tilted his head. "Clara." Just my name, but the way he spoke it sent a tremor through me. "I'm tired," I admitted, "and scared. And I feel guilty every time I see you because I know we still owe you money." "You're working it off," he said. "More than that, you're showing up, that matters." I stepped closer to the bucket, watching the water droplets fall one by one. "Sometimes I feel like that," I said quietly. "Like the leak. Like no matter how much I try to hold everything together, something always starts to drip." He chuckled softly, then fell silent again. When I looked up, he was closer than I'd realized. I could see the faint silver in his stubble, the lines around his mouth, the tired kindness in his eyes. "You don't have to carry it alone, you know," he said. "Who else is going to?" I replied. "My husband's barely home. My son doesn't need to see me fall apart. It's easier to pretend." His voice dropped. "Don't pretend with me." I swallowed. My heart was pounding too fast. "No," I said, barely above a whisper. "I don't." The rain intensified, drumming harder against the windows. The lobby felt like its own sequestered world, sealed off from everything else. He reached out very slowly, as if giving me ample time to retreat, and brushed a loose strand of hair from my face. "Clara," he murmured. "Tell me to stop and I will." I should have. I knew that. I knew I was a married woman standing far too close to a man who was not my husband. A man who had shown me profound kindness when I was at my most vulnerable. A man I had started to think about at night when sleep evaded me. But instead of stepping back, I did the one thing I had promised myself I would never do. I stepped closer. My voice shook when I answered. "I don't want you to stop." His hand lingered near my cheek, warm and steady, and in that moment, it wasn't about rent or favors or desperation. It was about being seen, being wanted, being held up instead of constantly holding everyone else together. When he leaned in, it was slow enough that I could have turned away. I didn't. Our lips met in a careful, almost hesitant kiss, as if we were both testing its weight. It wasn't wild or rushed. It was gentle, searching, filled with all the unspoken words neither of us had dared to utter. For the briefest moment, I forgot the world beyond the lobby. I forgot the bills, the fear, the damp ceiling. All I felt was the security of his hand, the small of my back, and the frightening, intoxicating warmth blooming inside me. When we finally pulled apart, we both took a breath, like surfacing from deep water. "This changes things," I whispered. "Yes," he said quietly, "it does." I glanced towards the stairwell that led back to my apartment, back to my husband, my son, my life. "I didn't pay you with money tonight," I said, my voice barely steady, "but I think I've given you something far more dangerous." His eyes held mine, tender and conflicted. "You don't owe me anything, Clara," he said softly. "Not like that. Whatever happens next, it has to be something you truly want, not something you feel compelled to do because of rent." I nodded, but deep inside I already knew the truth I hadn't yet spoken aloud. It wasn't the rent that had led me to that lobby. It was the loneliness. And the worst part was, for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel alone anymore. The morning after that kiss, everything outwardly appeared the same, yet nothing felt the same. The sun still filtered through the blinds in thin, pale stripes. My husband, Michael, was still snoring softly on the couch, still wearing the same wrinkled t-shirt from the previous night. My son was still asleep in his room, headphones on, likely dreaming of video games or school or whatever occupies the mind of a 13-year-old. But inside me, something had shifted, quietly, profoundly, undeniably. All night I kept waking, pressing my fingers to my lips as if I could still feel Arthur there. I replayed the moment in the lobby repeatedly, the rain, the warmth of his hand, that gentle, probing kiss that spoke volumes more than we dared to verbalize. By 8 a.m., I couldn't endure the silence in my apartment any longer. I slipped on jeans, tied my hair up, and stepped into the hallway. The building felt different too, as if the very walls held a secret and were waiting to see my next move. I didn't expect him to be downstairs so early, but when I opened the lobby door, he was there, standing on a ladder, meticulously tightening a light fixture, as if he hadn't spent half the night awake, thinking of me too. He froze when he saw me. Neither of us spoke for a moment. The only sound was the soft hum of the light he was working on. "Morning," he said finally, his voice low, careful. "Hi," I answered, my voice trembling. I hadn't planned what to say. How could I? How do you articulate something so profound without shattering something else in the process? He climbed down and set the screwdriver aside. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," I admitted. Honesty with him felt like a natural reflex now. "I wasn't sure if you'd avoid me," he said. "I wasn't sure if you would." He shook his head. "No, not after last night. That wasn't a mistake to me." Hearing that felt like taking a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years, but the guilt followed immediately, sharp and familiar. "Arthur," I said quietly, "I'm married. I can't pretend that doesn't matter." "I know," he said. "I haven't forgotten for a second." He stepped closer, not touching me, just near enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "You don't have to defend yourself," he said gently. "You didn't drag me into anything. It happened because we were two lonely people who found comfort in each other." Lonely? The word stung primarily because it was unequivocally true. But there was something else I needed to comprehend, something that had kept me awake through the night. "Did you kiss me because you felt sorry for me?" I asked. His expression softened in a way that made my chest ache. "No," he said. "I kissed you because I haven't stopped thinking about you for months." My breath caught. "What?" I whispered. He looked down, almost embarrassed. "You walk into every room like you're trying to occupy less space than you deserve, like life has been demanding too much of you for too long. I noticed that long before you ever told me about your financial difficulties." My eyes burned. "And you cared?" I asked. "I did," he said. "I do." For a moment neither of us moved. The rain had ceased outside, but the silence between us felt like its own kind of storm, quiet, heavy, laden with things waiting to fall. "Last night," I said slowly, "I felt seen more than I have in years." "You were," he murmured. I looked towards the stairwell. Upstairs resided my family, my responsibilities, my life. Down here was a man who had acknowledged a small, forgotten part of myself. "I don't want this to be something messy," I said. "I don't want to hurt anyone." I know, he replied. And I'm not asking you to choose anything right now. I'm not asking for promises. Then what are you asking? He exhaled. That you stop pretending you're not allowed to want happiness. The words struck me so deeply that for a moment I couldn't speak. He stepped a little closer. Can I ask you something? I nodded. When's the last time you felt truly taken care of? Not as a mother or a wife, just as Clara. I opened my mouth, but no words emerged. Because the truth was starkly simple, I couldn't remember. Years. It had been years. He didn't touch me. He didn't have to. His mere presence felt like a hand pressed softly to a bruise, not to worsen it, but to acknowledge its existence. Whatever you decide, he said, I won't pressure you. But don't pretend last night didn't mean something. Not to me and not to you. A tear escaped before I could stop it. I wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. Hey, he said softly, don't hide from me. I'm not, I whispered. That's the problem. With you, I don't hide. He looked like he wanted to reach for me, but he held himself perfectly still. You don't owe me anything, he said again. Not affection, not choices, not explanations. If you walk away right now, I'll understand. And if I don't walk away, I asked. His eyes met mine, steady, warm, open. Then I'll take care of you in any way you need, he said. Not as your landlord, not because of rent, but because I care about the woman standing in front of me. My heart felt like it was folding in on itself. Fear, longing, and years of being starved for tenderness mingled all at once. For a long moment I just stood there, trying to breathe through everything rising inside me. I don't know where this goes, I confessed. You don't need to, he answered. Sometimes the first step is just admitting you deserve more than mere survival. More than survival. The words sank deep. I stepped closer, just slightly, but it was enough that the space between us transformed again, warming, tightening, becoming something fragile and profoundly real. He didn't pull me in. He didn't even raise his hand. He simply waited, letting me choose. And for the first time in years, I did choose. I leaned forward, resting my forehead lightly against his chest. No kiss, no rush, just a quiet, trembling closeness. He breathed in slowly, as if committing the moment to memory. Clara, he murmured. Whatever happens, I'm here. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe. Not because my problems had miraculously vanished, not because life had suddenly resolved itself, but because, for once, someone looked at me, not through the lens of what I provided, what I carried, what I merely survived, but as a woman who still had the inherent right to feel wanted, understood, and cared for. We stayed like that in that quiet lobby for longer than we should have. Long enough to feel an undeniable shift. Long enough to know the kiss wasn't an accident. Long enough to understand that the persistent ache inside me wasn't going to vanish by simply pretending it wasn't there. When I finally stepped back, his hands remained at his sides, but his eyes held mine like a silent promise. I'll text you later, I said softly. Whenever you're ready, he replied. I walked up the stairs slowly, feeling the weight of my life above me, but also something new, something warm, still lingering on my skin. My marriage wasn't mended. My financial problems weren't solved. My choices were far from simple. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt human again, and that, I knew, was the beginning of everything that was to come. As I reached my apartment door, I paused, glancing back down the empty stairwell. The silence no longer felt heavy with unspoken truths, but rather with quiet anticipation. I took a deep breath, the scent of fresh rain still in the air. This new path was uncharted, fraught with complexities and uncertainties, but for the first time in a very long time, I felt a flicker of hope, a nascent sense of agency. The journey ahead was mine to navigate, and for once, I didn't feel utterly alone in it. The next few days were a blur of internal conflict and quiet observations. I found myself watching Michael with a new, critical eye, seeing the ways we had drifted apart, the unspoken resentments that had calcified over time. And then there was Arthur. His texts remained professional, yet held a subtle undercurrent of warmth, a gentle patience. He didn't push. He simply waited. One afternoon, a few days after our encounter, I was in the lobby, checking the mail, when he arrived. He carried a small bag of groceries. "Afternoon, Clara," he said, his voice calm, his gaze meeting mine directly. "Everything all right with Unit 2C's heating?" "It seems to be fine now," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. They haven't texted me back." He nodded, and for a moment we just stood there. Then he spoke again, his voice lower this time. "I meant what I said, about you deserving more than survival." I swallowed, the truth of his words echoing within me. "I know. And I meant what I said about being here," he added, his eyes searching mine. "Whatever that means for you." I looked down at the handful of junk mail in my hand. "It means a lot," I admitted. "More than I can say right now." He reached into his grocery bag and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden bird, no larger than my thumb. "I saw this at a market this morning," he said, offering it to me. "It reminded me of something. A tiny thing, but with a lot of resilience." I took the bird, my fingers brushing his. The wood was smooth and cool, the carving exquisite. "It's beautiful," I whispered, touched by the unexpected gesture. "Keep it," he said softly, a reminder that even the smallest things can hold a lot of strength. He didn't ask for anything in return, he simply gave, and in that moment the weight of my unspoken decision felt both crushing and liberating. I looked at the small wooden bird, then at Arthur, standing there, patient and kind. My life was a complicated tapestry, woven with threads of duty, love, and quiet desperation. But for the first time, a new vibrant thread had been introduced, one that promised not an escape from reality, but a different kind of reality, one where my own happiness was a valid consideration. I knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified me, that my life would never be the same. The path ahead was uncertain, messy, and potentially heartbreaking for some involved. But as I clutched the tiny wooden bird, I also knew that I couldn't, and wouldn't, simply pretend I hadn't been seen, hadn't been desired, hadn't been offered a glimpse of a different future. The silence in the lobby no longer felt like a waiting game, but an invitation to finally choose myself. And so, as the days turned into weeks, the small wooden bird sat on my kitchen windowsill, a constant, silent reminder. I began to speak more honestly to Michael, tentatively at first, about our financial strain, about my own unhappiness. The conversations were difficult, often painful, and sometimes ended in strained silence. But they were happening. And with Arthur, our interactions remained carefully ambiguous, a delicate dance of unspoken understanding, always respectful, yet brimming with an undeniable undercurrent of connection. The rent payments gradually returned to normal, my work around the building becoming a genuine help, not just a desperate measure. One evening, as the sun set, casting long shadows through my apartment, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table again, not with bills but with a pen and paper. I began to write. Not a letter, not a plan, but simply words, thoughts, feelings that had been bottled up for too long. And as I wrote, the small wooden bird on the windowsill seemed to catch the last rays of light, shimmering softly, a tiny beacon of the strength and resilience I was slowly, painstakingly, rediscovering within myself. The story of my life was far from over. It was, in fact, just beginning its most honest and challenging chapter yet.